A lot of photographers don't really know when to make the switch from being a jack of all trades to niching down into one specific category. And for us, obviously that's weddings, but there are a lot of different types of photography. There's like the studio slash family, where it's like newborns, family, maternity, that kind of stuff. Then there's like more the corporate stuff, which is like headshots and events. And then there's like landscape, and then there's nature. There's like so many different things, and you really don't know what you like until you start doing all of them. And that's kind of what happens when you start a business is you go wide, and then you just try a bunch of different real estate. I didn't even talk about that one, but that's another crazy one. You try everything, and then once you figure out kind of what it is that you want to do,
what you like doing,
what you're passionate about, yeah, exactly, then you can start kind of narrowing that down. Like portraits is a big one where a lot of people just do the studio, family, weddings, headshots, maybe that kind of realm. But we're going to talk today about where we ended up transitioning, because right now I would say we're wedding experts in our market. And how did we become that? Because we used to do kind of a jack of all trade, and then what happened? What happened? Take me through the story.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, same thing. I didn't really know what I really enjoyed doing. I have to admit, I started doing pretty much everything right away. So I did pets, I did headshots, I did families, I did newborns, and I did weddings. I kind of did everything all at once. I think because I had a baby, it was just naturally easier to do more baby photos because there's just so many babies and just like so many families, and you can kind of do them whenever. With a wedding, you don't just pick up and shoot somebody's wedding like next week, right? Like very rarely will that happen. And so I found like right away, it was really easy for me to get into like doing a lot of family photos or newborn photos or maternity. Like there's just kind of always that revolving door of opportunity. Plus, like, you could do them anytime, right? You didn't have to wait until like the next year for them to get married and to shoot that one day. However, I realized it took a little bit of time, and I think that's why we wanted to talk a little bit about niching, because I feel like, and I see it when we talk to some of our students, is that they're having these blockages when it comes to what they want to focus on. And I can remember very early on in my career, about 2 years in, I was working with a business coach, and I was kind of explaining to her the two scenarios. Like, I could either go and do weddings, or I could continue doing family sessions. And when you look at it from like a cost of doing business perspective, I could do 5 family sessions a week or more, right? Like realistically, I could do probably 5+ family sessions a week, or 5+ newborns, or whatever it is. But I could really only do 1 wedding a week, maybe 2, right? But like really you were looking at booking kind of 1 to 2 weddings a weekend, and let's say on the safe side, 1 a weekend, sort of throughout like a partial amount of the year, whereas I could do families all year round, right?
Yeah, true.
And so when you look at kind of like the costs associated, or like the income that you could make from those 2 options, like you definitely can make quite a bit more, I would say, on the family side of things, but you're hustling more, right? Like you're having to book, 5 times as many, or maybe even more than that.
5 times 50 is like 250 sessions in a year.
Yeah. So you're doing like 250 different clients in a year, and you're always looking for new people year after year. Sometimes you get some repeats in there that come for a little family update, but for the most part, you're kind of looking for 250 new clients every year. Whereas you could make the same amount of money, but do a lot less weddings, right? Because you're making a larger amount on that day. So when we broke it down, I was looking at it, and even though it made more sense to continue doing families, I was almost a little bit heartbroken because I really enjoyed doing weddings. But when you looked at it like financially, it made sense to kind of continue down the family path, right? We have a studio, and like I was really good at it, and like I liked it, but I just wasn't really where my heart was, And I would say we continued for a few years still trying. And I think the part where it comes to, where people struggle and they have this block is it's like, what do I do with my website, right? Like, what do I do with my social media?
That's where I was going to go to, is like, sure, you could do it all. You could keep doing it all, but where are people going to find you? How are you going to find clients? And
what's my messaging, right?
Correct.
Who am I trying to attract?
What's your brand?
Are you trying to attract like pregnant people? Are you trying to attract families that have, young kids? Are you trying to attract a couple who just got engaged? Like trying to do all of that, or like corporate clients, like trying to do all that in kind of one singular space proved very difficult for us in many different ways. And it kind of showed up in so many ways when it was come to like, who am I trying to attract? Who are we trying to market to? What do we put on our website? What's the main thing? Do we have the first thing pop up be weddings, or is it going to be babies? Because I do more of that. And then also on our social media. At one point, I think I had like 3 different social medias. I think I had a video one, I had a newborn studio one, and then I had weddings one. Chaos, right? Like let's just talk about pure chaos when it comes to trying to manage. Like I have a hard enough time managing one, let alone trying to do, multiples of that, right? With 2 very different clientele. Now, once somebody gets married, can I now service them in terms of like taking their family photos and newborn and maternity and things like that? Absolutely. Yeah. Right? I can absolutely do that. But I was probably doing about 100 sessions a year, I would say. That was kind of like where I was, plus weddings at one point. Like it was pretty busy, and that wasn't including like mini sessions. I'm talking just like 100 sessions throughout the year. So like money was great, but again, I found that always trying to find new clients thing pretty exhausting, right? With weddings, you don't need to find quite so many people. You're looking for 20 to 30 maybe. Like for us, we both do it full time. So we're probably looking for a higher number of weddings than most people will be looking for. Instead of it just needing like 15 to 20 weddings, we're probably looking more like 30 to 40 weddings a year, just to, because we're replacing both of our salaries. And so that seemed like an easier job, funny enough, to book 40 weddings than it would be to book 250 plus clients a year.
I think one of the biggest things that I think we realized about niching down was, who are we trying to attract? But also we wanted to get more into the wedding space, and we were starting to offer video pretty early on, like was it 6 years ago, 7 years ago now. And obviously the video part doesn't translate very well into like studio work and that kind of stuff, like maybe corporate. But because we were doing the photo video on the wedding side, we decided like we wanted to go all in on that in 2020, I think, something like that.
Well, I would say like 2017 you started. 2018 was kind of like we're still finding our feet. 2019 was the year that we really did a lot of stuff for free, like to try and build up your portfolio.
Yeah, but I'm talking about on the website part.
Oh, okay. Well, 2020 definitely became like the year.
2020 is when we decided to change our website to be more wedding specific.
Yeah, so that's like 5 years in. It took us 5 years when you look at it like that. So no wonder why people struggle. Like we struggled too, in the sense of
it's very hard to be able to do that. But I think what the point I was getting at is we were looking about where our inquiries were coming from. And a lot of our wedding clients were finding us either through social media or Google at the time, like if they could even find us. We weren't really ranking for anything at that point. Or we were hustling and going to try to find like planners or venues or like go to wedding shows. Like that's how we were getting out there. But we found that a lot of the studio and families would be word of mouth because we had done so many leading up to it that in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if we don't have to attract studio clients using our website or online with like keywords and Google, then let's just funnel all of our energy into trying to show up on like wedding terms, right? Wedding keywords, and really attracting that kind of client because they need a little bit more information. They need a little bit more love and care to be able to spend a bigger budget, right?
And I also think too, where we were, right? Like you have to imagine where we were in 2020 or even right before that when we were kind of considering making that push to like do more weddings, is that we were in a space where we were both at home. You were home on, leave from your government job because we had our twins, late in 2018. When you think about it from that perspective, it's interesting to me because you understand that like we wanted to sort of predict our income a little bit, because if you were ever going to make that switch to full time or, because I had already made the switch and I was doing quite well. But to now replace your income, you know, like that was a big deal, right? Like we kind of got a taste of what that looked like in 2018, 2019, because you were home and obviously your salary got cut like crazy. So we got kind of an idea and motivation to kind of do that. But once we were trying to figure out like how we're going to move forward with things, weddings just seemed to make the most sense because we could predict how much money we were going to make. So we knew if we booked this amount of weddings at this price, you know, we calculate all of our costs and our expenses and our taxes and stuff, like we knew we could replace your income pretty easily if we booked this number. And so that was kind of our goal. It was very easy. Like we could kind of do that with sessions, but it was a hustle. It was a lot more of a hustle we found.
You can't nobody books sessions like 6 months in advance. It's very rare.
Some, but I mean, like maybe a maternity and newborn, like if they know, they can kind of book, but you're not booking like 30 newborns worth, right? in 3 months, right? Like, I don't know. I personally don't see very many people in the city doing it that way. Maybe in certain parts of the world that could be very normal for you, but in our city, I doubt there's very many family photographers that could say that they have the next 6 months fully booked. Like, I doubt it. I really doubt it. Even the most busy people, I don't think that they could say that unless they're like, there's maybe this one anomaly that charges like $0 basically for sessions and kind of runs like a machine. But essentially, like for the most part, I'd say most are not doing it like that.
Yeah. So niching into weddings gives you a better understanding of your income for the year. There's a lot more around the demand and expectations of a photographer if they're doing a wedding, because it is like a live event and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So that was kind of like all the factors that got us thinking, yeah, we should probably focus our website mostly about wedding photography, wedding videography, and how we can service those people. Still have a section for studio if anyone is interested in seeing, you know, newborn, maternity, family type stuff. But that kind of trickles in through the years. We found that like those inquiries haven't really dropped because we changed our website, but it was definitely worthwhile having it on our website for the first few years so that people just understood what we did, right? Because on the flip side, if anyone visits our website and is like, oh, well, I'm looking for corporate event coverage, and they look at our website, like we literally talk nothing of corporate. Do we do corporate? Sure, sometimes. And we'd love to probably do some more here and there because it just works with our schedule in the off season, or it's a Monday to Friday thing. But nobody even approaches us with that subject because that's just not our brand. Like we don't ever talk about it. We don't ever put it anywhere. So it can, like, niching down can also have a little bit of a negative effect that way. But you're then also, again, flip back to the positive side. You're known as like the expert in that field, and that feels good when people are like, yes, you're worth this much money because you're obviously like specialized in this field.
Yeah. And I mean, it really gets you to hone in on your craft too, right? Like when you're doing 90% of your portfolio work is weddings, and you talk about weddings, and that's all you're kind of doing all the time. You're going to wedding events and networking with other wedding vendors. Like it just kind of all makes sense, right? And so I would encourage you, if you're on the fence about what it is that you want to be capturing, looking at a niche, and I feel like people throw that word around. They're like, you need to niche down, niche down. But it will help with your like mental health in the sense of you won't be wondering like why people aren't finding you or why people aren't booking you or whatever, because you're not going to be that person that kind of does a little bit of everything. You're going to be known as the guy or the girl that just does, you know, a little bit of everything. But when somebody lands on your website, they're not going to feel like you're really good at any of those things.
That you're like talking to them, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm a wedding person and I jump on our website, like everything speaks to me. But if I'm like looking for maternity photos and you could jump on our website, like unless you go specifically to our studio page, like none of it's going to attract you to us. Right?
Like maybe the photos are pretty and the words are nice and like you get a feel for us, but it's definitely going to probably push you off of our website, if anything, because it's not going to be servicing what you're looking for when you land on there, especially if you're just doing a Google search, right? You have to think of like, okay, who is finding my website? Well, it's a random person typing, you know, newborn photographer city, you know, and then they look like, and if they land on your website and it's like weddings, they're gonna be like, well, maybe this person doesn't do newborns anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What if they close their business? That's another perspective, right?
Right. So the idea is that I think the niching, I mean, let's talk about the positives. Essentially, it's only helped us propel our business forward in the sense of people refer us a lot. You know, we're known, like people, you know, not only just other people in the industry, but, you know, clients recommend us, you know, even people that we meet with that don't even book us still recommend us because they're like, oh, they're really great. They're wonderful, but maybe we didn't, you know, mesh with their style or the price or whatever. So I find like, because we're known as like wedding industry experts at what we do, like we see a lot more people funneling in that are just really excited to work with us, because everything that our messaging on our social media, even our messaging on our you know, newsletters that we send out, or messaging, you know, around the podcast or whatever, everything is talking about weddings. So it all kind of makes sense. It's driving people towards that one common thing, which is we've niched down to become wedding industry experts, you know, photography, videography, right? And that is really where we've come to. And it's not saying like that you can't do a bunch of other things. I don't think that, like, I won't want you to think you'll never do them, but it'll help you give clarity on those moments when you're like, okay, I need to make a post today about something. Luke and I do this a lot, where we'll be like, hey, let's make a post about blah, blah, blah. Let's say like wedding timelines. Let's just give an example. And when we're talking about wedding timelines, what are we talking about? Are we talking about how to build one? Are we talking about what questions we need to ask? Now, could that apply to maybe like photographers, or could it apply to teaching clients, right? And we always have to think, okay, well, for this one, I'm trying to teach a client, or I'm trying to talk to a client about why a timeline is important. Now, could a photographer listen to that and maybe pick up some things and learn from it? Sure. But I'm not really speaking to the photographer. I'm speaking to the person who has no idea has never been to a wedding before. Like, that's kind of my target audience. Yeah. Whereas if I'm going the other route, which is like, you know, I want to talk to a photographer, I don't need to like tell them why they should do, you know, a timeline consultation with the client, because like it's so important for them to do something like that, because it'll help them, you know, get better clarity on things. Like, you can be very specific, right? Do you see how the messaging changes when you're thinking about like, I'm talking about a wedding timeline, but now I'm talking to a photographer versus talking to like another client, right? So that's kind of why I think the niching is so important, when you have a real clear idea of who you're trying to service.
And it doesn't mean that you can't have a website for families and whatever, and then like a website for weddings. Obviously, that just means it's like double the websites to upkeep and to like post content
and pay for.
We've had similar thoughts as well on doing like different Instagram. Like, oh, if I wanted to do more corporate stuff, like, should I just build an Instagram or like have a page on our website or whatever it is based on this service? And I think you can, but there is some validity to what you said a little bit earlier. I don't know if you like meant to really say it, but it's also just putting all your eggs in one basket. So it's like using all your resources for one specific thing, like the weddings. So you would spend a lot of your time like investing in gear towards weddings, like off-camera flashes or lights, or you like flat lay mats, and there's like light stands. I don't know. There's like a whole bunch of things that weddings, like bags and travel, because they have to like move from location to location all the time. Doing that, plus like using some of your networking is like with venues and planners and like that specifically. So when we niched down, I found that we actually ended up like booking a lot more weddings, because we started using all of our time and effort towards a specific goal, was to get more weddings. Don't let this discourage you thinking like you're never going to have any other family sessions because you're like working towards one thing. If you started and you spent a couple years like doing mini sessions, family sessions, there's always going to be the repeat clients, the people that like talk about you to their friends, word of mouth. So like we still get, I don't know, like at least one session a week throughout the whole year, pretty much, of we don't even have to try. It just kind of comes to us, which is nice. And then in the winter, if we wanted to, we can like push a little bit more, post in like some Facebook groups or advertise like, hey, like this week or this month, I'm doing this kind of work. Like, come see me, book me, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I hope that you understand that you can have a section of your website that's different, right?
True.
But I think when, we've done sort of website learning and understand how that works, like you need to be pretty specific on, like, let's say your homepage, your pricing page, and your contact page, that it's all kind of surrounding kind of one topic, right?
It has to be, yeah.
To really get you to stand out. Like if you're trying to get leads, like, I mean, I feel like we're all trying to get leads, right? We're all trying to get people to find us on the internet and give us money to do the services that we're trying to do. And so in order to do that, if you really love doing weddings, or you really love doing families, or whatever it is that you love doing, then focus on that and make that the main part of your every day, of your talking. Like when people talk about me, like if I'm in a friend group or whatever, they'll say Bethany is a wedding photographer. Like they don't just call me a photographer. They'll say like Bethany shoots weddings. Like that's what she does. And to me, like I can remember when I first started, like I don't think people ever said that, right? Because I was doing too many things. I think that it's so important to get that messaging sooner. I mean, I felt like we struggled with it for a very long time. I can remember specifically we paid too much money to have somebody do our website. And I'll never forget, they took like 4 images. So it was like maternity, newborn, family, and then wedding. And it was like these like banners across our site, and it looked awful. And it just, I could tell, like, in my mind, I kind of pictured it a different way, but it was just too much. Like it was too complicated. And I can imagine if I felt like it was complicated, how could anybody else really, you know what I mean? Like a website really makes sense, from a Google perspective or whatever. And yeah, I feel like our business took off because we niched down. And I think that that's the part that people are scared about, is that if I niche, then what if nobody books me and nobody gets, like until you start getting busy enough, you can still do those other things. You're just not going to talk about them as much. Like that's kind of what happens. I feel like for us, we also got the wedding show. So that was something like, if you really want to get into weddings, we did a wedding show, I would say in 2019, and that really propelled us forward. Like all of a sudden, we went from having, maybe 10-ish weddings a year, and then we bumped up to 30 weddings really quickly from doing that wedding show.
I mean, there are other factors, like we were the cheapest there.
I don't know about the cheapest there, but we were cheap, and, we ended up booking quite a few. But the idea is that we put in a lot of work. Like, let's just be honest. We did a bunch of stuff in 2019 where we essentially collaborated with planners to give clients who had really, really nice weddings some video coverage for their day for free in order for us to build our portfolio. So like we put in the work. It wasn't like, like there was like a double thing there happening, but we really focused on that and really made good connections. And then all of a sudden, we exploded from there. I mean, 2020 happened and kind of screwed us, but it didn't really slow down our pace. I would say, if anything, it accelerated it.
A lot of websites I see now of newer photographers, and it has, oh, here's about me, here's the portfolio, and it like lists the different portfolios that they have. And then it's like pricing and packaging, and it's like you could do family this, and like maternity is this, newborn is this, and like wedding is like contact me for wedding. And like you can still do all these things, but the way that you have to, like, if you're looking at your brand, your messaging, your website specifically, is like your website is a tool so that people can find you. And the most common tool is like you're either on YouTube or you're on Google. Like that's what gets pulled up on everything. And if you look at how are you going to be found on Google, like you have to dedicate your website to a specific topic in order to show up. Unless you've just had a website forever and you have like a billion blog posts about everything, then you need to like tailor your website to be about a specific subject, or else like those search engines will just find a better website that does it.
And you'll still be at the bottom.
Exactly. So that's the way I see websites. It's like, it doesn't define who you are, but it can really help you get clients of a specific type of photography that you really want to do. So think about that. Like you said, maybe it's not wedding specific, but you should probably tailor your website to a specific client or an audience and try to get them to land on your website more often.
We hope that this has been helpful. I feel like we could go on and on about niching, and we hear it all the time in the wedding community or like photography community of people just being like, I don't know what to do. I'm not finding I'm getting enough bookings, or I'm not getting this. And sometimes it really just comes down to looking and taking a big picture look at what everything that you're doing, like all the things that you're doing, in the sense of, am I actually speaking to the right people?
Yeah.
Like, is my website speaking to the right people that I want to attract? Is my social media speaking to those people? And if, one day you're showing a baby photo and then the next day you're showing a pregnant person and the next day you're showing a wedding, I mean, I think it's kind of confusing when you look at it from that outside person's view, right?
And it's a little bit backwards. It should be the wedding, then the pregnant person, then the baby, right?
Luke being the jokester. But the idea is that you want to keep being like in front of people and showing up as the wedding person if you want to book weddings. If you want to keep doing newborns and families, and you want to keep showing up as the newborn and family person. If you want to do these other things, like, I think there's validity in having a whole new website, a whole separate thing, maybe a whole social media. And we've seen that done successfully for a lot of people that do that. So I think, like, if you want to do both, it's okay. But maybe eventually you might need to look at separating things. And I think that there's no right or wrong way to do it. That's just our opinions and experience. But we hope that this was helpful. If you've been struggling with it, it took us 5 years.
It's a cycle though. And you're like, oh, well, if I'm not booking enough weddings, then why would I make my website about weddings? But it's like, you won't book more weddings unless you make your website about weddings. So you kind of just have to take a leap of faith and just try to go for that and really go all in on one thing. And you'll see, like, it makes a big difference. It really does.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Turning heads with their flash. Wedding photographers capturing love in a flash. Taking shots like paparazzi, they're a dynamic duo. Posing couples like models on their love they bestow. Shooting weddings, they got the perfect frame. Look behind the lens while Bethany brings the flame. Capturing every moment, they never miss a beat. Freezing time, making memories that are oh so sweet.